Hello, everybody. This is today's lectures on the atomic bomb that you should be watching for your parlay activity that we're going to be doing. So I wanted to start off by talking about this quote by Albert Einstein and kind of talking some history behind it. As you guys are probably well aware, coming back from world history and your class and based on what you know, um, Hitler began an anti-Jewish policy all throughout Germany in the 1930s. He prevented them from getting jobs. He instituted a German boycott on Jewish businesses, and that was even before the Holocaust and the death camps and concentration camps stripped their citizenship, embarrassed them. In the 1930s, also you have not only in Germany but in Russia, um, Jews were being deported, and the writing on the wall, the lack of rights, the lack of business opportunities. Um, many Jews are going to escape um, and leave Germany, leave Poland, and go all throughout the world. And the biggest one of the bigger mistakes that Hitler made was that in that process of Jews becoming either deported or escaping Germany, is that you're going to have hundreds of arguably the brightest minds that the world has ever seen. Albert Einstein, for one, was one of the scientists that is going to escape the wrath of Germany. And many of these scientists are going to go on to places like the United States or Great Britain or Canada and are going to help these countries, for the Allied powers, going to help them develop new technologies during the course of World War II and beyond to help them defeat them. Um, so that's, again, a huge mistake that Hitler's going to make. So, little story behind this. Obviously, Albert Einstein. I assume you guys have all heard of Albert Einstein. Um, in the late 1930s, Albert Einstein is going to write a letter to President FDR, and it's going to be basically is going to warn FDR in the United States that Hitler has begun. Hello. Hitler has begun the process of looking into nuclear energy to create a nuclear bomb. And the thought was that Hitler was developing this was obviously to use it on the Allies. And this is going to prompt Albert Einstein to write this letter because obviously, if this bomb, this technology gets in the hands of Hitler, that's going to be the end. So Einstein writes this letter to FDR, and FDR heeds the warning and he begins to look into, and FDR will develop a nuclear commission to start looking into the processes of creating a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, later on, Albert Einstein is going to say, I made one great mistake in my life when I signed that letter to President Roosevelt recommending that atom bombs be made, but there was some justification, the danger that the Germans would make them. So later on, Einstein will go on to regret this decision because he knows what this atom bomb is going to create. It's going to create basically a massive arms race and the destruction that the world has never seen before. But he also knows too that Hitler at some point was going to get access to this weapon, and that things would have been much worse. So, um, President Roosevelt is going to um, develop this nuclear commission, and they're going to start the process of the Manhattan Project. Now, what's the Manhattan Project? This is like the secret code, essentially. This was the building, the construction of the atomic bomb. Throughout this whole process, starting like 1939-ish, all the way to the conclusion of 1945, when they have the weapon, um, over $2 billion was spent creating the atomic bomb. Now, in today's money, that's roughly about $20 billion. So you're talking about a massive amount of resources, massive amounts of money to create this weapon. And you have these facilities all over the United States that were going to be created to develop and to process and to research this atomic bomb. The three main research facilities where scientists are going to be located at, you have Los Alamos, New Mexico, you have Oak Ridge, Tennessee, you have a place in Chicago, you have a place in Washington State, um, where scientists and are going to be working basically around the clock in developing this weapon. In the course of the 6 years, you roughly have about 120,000, 130,000 employees that are going to be working on this project. Now, not all of these people are going to be scientists. Many of them are going to be, factory workers, etc. They're going to make different parts for this weapon. And what's more impressive about this project is that most of the people that were working on this project had no idea what they were building. And it got to the point, too, where there were even the vice president of the United States didn't even have an idea, Harry Truman. Harry Truman was the vice president at the time, and he had no idea that we were even building this weapon. So this was like a need-to-know basis. Only a select few people actually knew what was going on. We were coordinating with Great Britain. We were coordinating with members of Canada as well and other allies in developing this weapon, but this was extremely, extremely top secret. Um, and the scientists that now Einstein was not the person in charge of the atomic bomb. He just wrote the letter to FDR. He will work on the project. He will work on the project in some capacities. But the leader of the Manhattan Project, the lead scientist on this, will be Robert Oppenheimer. He's also known as the father of the atomic bomb. It's really interesting about him. You see a picture of him right here. When they first tested the atomic bomb, it was the Trinity test. I'll talk more about that in a minute. He basically said that he is the father of destruction. Essentially, he saw this thing go off, and he just could not believe it. He was in awe of what this weapon could possibly do if it was used in an actual battle or used on a location or a site. He was in disbelief how powerful this was. So that's what you kind of need to know in your notes. Robert Oppenheimer, lead scientist. He was the guy developer of the Manhattan Project. All right, so in July of 45, we're wrapping up. So at this point, Germany surrenders. All right, so Germany surrendered in May of 45. So the overall, guys, the plan to use the atomic bomb was specifically supposed to be used for Germany. But now at this point, Germany's dropped out of the war. So now we still have Japan. In July of 45, the Potsdam Conference, Harry Truman was told that the Trinity test was the testing of the atomic bomb. They detonated it in Los Alamos in the desert, and this is where Robert Oppenheimer says, I'm the destruction of the world, essentially. So now it got Truman, as he's sitting around this table with other leaders like Joseph Stalin and Winston Churchill. At this point, FDR passes away. So Truman now is the president. Now when FDR dies, this is when he's basically informed of this big, massive weapon that we potentially could have. So we have a big decision to make. He knows that if we use this weapon, there's going to be severe consequences. Obviously, if we have one, other countries are going to race to get one as well. So here's the reasons that that Truman is going to think about using this weapon. One, it's a big investment. $2 billion. That's a lot of money to not use it. So that's one thing. So if you're going to spend the money, research and develop it, the argument goes you should probably use it. Two, Operation Downfall. Obviously, the war planners that were planning an invasion of Japan all along, they knew that this invasion could take years and become very costly. Sure, in terms of human life, but also in terms of money as well, which was a big problem because we were running out of money. So they were saying 10 million Japanese could potentially die, and over 2 to 4 million Americans could die if we were to invade Japan. So if you use this weapon, you avoid all that. You put our troops, you end the war, you bring our troops home. So you have that kind of argument there. Three, I'm sorry, you got Pearl Harbor. We were neutral. We weren't involved in the war. Japan brought us into the war, and plus all their war atrocities that they have, been accused of over the course of the war. So this would kind of be like revenge, essentially. 4, big argument. Was Japan really going to surrender? The problem is that unconditional surrender was something that Japan historically didn't believe in. We did try to warn the Japanese that we had a weapon. We didn't tell them what it was, but we told them that we had a weapon, and if they didn't surrender, then we would use it. They didn't surrender. Wasn't really a part of the Japanese code. So there was many American politicians and higher ups in government that didn't believe that this was even going to be possible. And then the fifth one is kind of an underrated one, but I know us and the Soviet Union are on the same side, but that's not because we were friends, it's because we had a similar common enemy, which was Hitler and Japan. So at the Potsdam Conference, we were looking for the Soviet Union to agree to invade Japan with us. Um, it took Stalin a long time to he was kind of teetering on it, and eventually he agreed to do it. So then Truman has the decision to make. Do you go hand in hand and do you invade with the Soviet Union and become equals, or are you going to try and end the war before they can have any involvement? And if you do that, you can take all the credit. Well, we defeated Japan. We have this weapon, and the beauty about this in terms of the weapon was that we're the ones who have it. We have the power play. This strength of the atomic bomb is going to showcase U.S. superiority, U.S. strength. We did it. We ended the war, not the Soviet Union. Therefore, we are the superpower. Capitalism is above communism. So some of it some of it had to do with that as well, to show the U.S. strength and superiority of the Soviet Union, to scare them, like, hey, we're the superpower. We have the cards. So obviously they're reasoning against dropping the bomb, and obviously there's plenty of reasons for why we shouldn't drop the bomb. But as you'll read about in the next assignment that I have for you guys, we were just using regular bombs in Japan, guys. The Japanese Navy was decimated. They couldn't even defend their homeland. So we were firebombing. We were already bombing Japan for months leading up to the atomic bomb, which also leads to the counter argument that they weren't surrendering. They had no food. We were starving them out, and they still weren't surrendering. So was there really a need to drop the atomic bomb, or do you just keep dropping normal bombs on them? Two, the moral. You're dropping an atomic bomb not on a military site. You're dropping it in a civilian site. So there's going to be hundreds of thousands, millions of people who are going to be affected and dead because of this. How will this hurt our reputation around the world that we're going to use this bomb on a civilian site? So kind of deals with moral as well. And then the decades afterwards, what are the future consequences of this going to be? If these weapons get into the wrong hands, terrorists, countries that support terrorists, our enemies, how is this going to hurt the future? And we'll get into, obviously, in our next couple units. All right, so kind of get into this now. So eventually, we're going to use the first atomic bomb on August 6th, 1945. We nicknamed the first atomic bomb Little Boy. We drop it on Hiroshima. On August 9th, we drop the next one 3 days later. It's called Fat Man on Nagasaki. Now, these two locations were picked as kind of test location sites. These cities didn't really have a ton of military value, but for the most part, these two cities were untouched by the firebombing campaigns leading up. So essentially, these two sites were picked because we wanted to see exactly how much damage that these weapons can cause. And if you did it already on a site that was already pulverized by bombs, then your data is going to be skewed. And this was, for the most part, two civilian sites. They didn't really have a ton of military value. Which just kind of leads us into like a dark and crazy area. But so finally, after the second bomb, not for the first one, the Japanese didn't surrender. After the second one, they surrendered, which kind of goes back to that argument. Well, were they really going to surrender with just fire bombs with what we were doing? I don't know. So the big part of the problem with the atomic bomb is that sure, 140, 70,000 are going to die instantaneously. The problem is the aftermath. After an atomic bomb, the ground, everything is full of radiation. This is going to cause cancers. Radiation is going to get in the rain and drop down. It's going to get into the water. Big problem is going to be cancers, as you guys see here. Millions are going to die from radiation exposure. Cancer increases, and millions of dollars to rebuild. All right. So, anyways, that is it for today. We'll go on to the next assignment.